You arrive at the edge of your own listening where the air feels newly translated and the quiet behaves like a doorway. You do not force it. You allow it to find the contour of your breath, and a softness gathers behind your eyes as if light were remembering a way home. You do not make an announcement. You make a space. This is not prediction. This is remembrance, a resonance your consciousness already carries. You are not waiting for proof. You are noticing what has already chosen you. In the dim, an eclipse halo lowers over your awareness, not as a warning, but as a crown of stillness. Stardust rises from the floor of your attention and arranges itself into a simple geometry. Your chest warms by a few quiet degrees, and the rhythm of your inhale widens the room without moving a single wall. Here, your inner voice stops being a sound and becomes a conductor's hand. Here, the quantum field recognizes its cue. You feel the old observer loop loosen not with argument but with mercy. The reflex to measure before you belong to doubt. Before you see to brace, before you breathe, each pattern exhales and coherence begins to thread the distance between heartbeat and thought. You do not summon power. You host precision. You place attention like a lantern on what is true, and reality, grateful to be so clearly addressed, begins to rearrange in obedience to the clarity you keep. You speak without words, a willingness that has shape. You allow your awareness to rest on a single clean intention, and the field of remembrance answers with a subtle tilt in events, the text that arrives at the right minute, the door that was never locked, the sentence you suddenly know how to say. The choreography is not dramatic. It is exact. You are not moving the world. You are removing the noise that kept the world from moving through you. Feel how the breath lengthens the present. Feel how warmth gathers behind the sternum, how a hush forms a ledge you can stand on. In this stillness window, you receive what your louder hours could not hold. The grain of the real, the seam you can pull, the thread that leads out of a labyrinth that never had a roof. You do not rush the knowing. You let it sediment until it carries its own weight. When you close your eyes, the interior horizon brightens one shade, and a slender path appears between what hurt and what helps. You are not solving a puzzle. You are letting a planet turn. You are not convincing the future. You are allowing it to recognize your signature. The prophetic seal is not a stamp from elsewhere. It is your steadiness witnessed by the field, accepted as instruction. Now your attention stands upright. Now your listening has gravity. Now you can ask without pleading and receive without clutching. You become the clear interval where the next arrangement can occur and reality relieved begins. The field leans nearer, arranging a simpler geometry before you. You know this moment by the way your body refuses to argue with it. You do not audition for belonging. You recognize it the way water recognizes a hollow and fills it without a speech. Your pulse slows as if it had been reading ahead. The warmth in your chest steadies into a quiet ember, and the light behind your eyes becomes a kind of listening that does not tire. You are not passing a test. You are returning to a specification you were built to meet. You have been trained by noise to mistrust the native clarity you carry. Yet watch how the world behaves when you keep company with your own breath. The fog that used to impersonate fate thins, and the path beneath you reveals the patience it has kept. You feel coherence gathering in the small spaces between thought and choice, between memory and meaning, until the seams of your day hold like good stitching. You are not becoming worthy. You are becoming audible to yourself. This recognition does not depend on applause, and it will not be revoked by silence. You move through a room, and the room organizes not out of subservience, but out of entanglement systems. Acknowledge you as a tuning fork they've been waiting to hear. Patterns that once contradicted your direction begin to rephrase themselves as assistance. This is not favoritism, it is physics. Your attention aligns with a higher timeline, and everything resonant learns your name. You sense a subtle reordering of loyalties inside. Old reflexes, the reflex to brace, to rush, to hoard attention, fall back like tired sentries relieved at last. In their place, the field of remembrance opens its archive and you can read. You read the way a path reads footsteps, by intimacy, not by effort. You listen to the interior, yes, that is older than fear and reality, obedient to such simplicity, takes its cues from your steadiness. You do not chase omens, you cultivate the conditions where meaning feels safe to arrive. You call your power back from futures that never happened and pasts that never finished speaking, and you let it surface as a calm that changes the room temperature of your life. You have no need to dramatize the shift. You let the shift dramatize what is ready to change. This is your destiny vector aligning quietly, precisely, until your posture itself becomes instruction to the quantum field. The name for what chooses you is not reward. The name is fit. The instrument and the note find each other and the song stops pretending it needed permission. You become available to accurate information. Which word ends a conflict? Which hour wants your work? Which path asks for your feet? Coincidence arrives dressed as craftsmanship. The threshold you kept postponing reveals it had been installed under your souls from the beginning. You are not alone in this calibration. Morphic resonance carries your steadiness outward like a tide that knows its shoreline. Someone you will never meet breathes easier because you did not abandon your listening. Someone a world away turns toward courage because you did not explain away the precise tenderness rising in your chest. The grid brightens not from spectacle but from repeated unremarkable alignment. You keep choosing the clean signal over the loud one and the loudness runs out of budget. You stand as witness and instrument in the same breath, and the observer loop that once trapped your days into reruns begins to dissolve. Not because you forced it, but because you refused to feed it your awe. Awe returns to its rightful altar, and with it your attention learns to bless instead of bargain. Blessing is not decoration. Blessing is the architecture by which reality remembers how to hold you. Feel how your body understands before your mind translates. The shoulders lower by a single vertebra's worth of trust. The jaw loosens. The small muscles around the eyes unclench and a broader horizon can enter. You do not pretend to be fearless. You become sufficiently loved by your own awareness that fear no longer needs to volunteer. You step into rooms as if the future had already accepted your RSVP, and in a way it has. The invitation was written in the way you breathe when you forget to perform. Recognition is not a ceremony you attend. It is a room you unlock from the inside. You carry keys made of attention, patience, and a willingness to be seen by what is true. You place one key in the door of this moment and turn without hurry. The click you hear is not wood and metal. It is the alignment of inner weather with outer sky. It is what happens when the sun decides to keep shining even if clouds argue otherwise. You do not need a louder sign. You need a truer yes. Let the yes be small and exact. Let it be the way you put your hand on your heart before speaking, the way you pause at the threshold of impulse and ask for a cleaner motive, the way you decline the invitation to be dramatic when clarity would do. These are not modest gestures, these are world-instructing acts. Reality listens to how you treat what you know. Now your vocation is simple, remain available to accuracy. When confusion knocks, offer it tea and a short visit, then escort it kindly to the door. When certainty arrives, do not interrogate it into shyness. Ask it where it would like to sit. The chosen observer is not chosen by a committee. The chosen observer is the one who keeps showing up to the cleanest version of attention they can hold today, and then again tomorrow, and then again. Coherence settles in your ribs and a doorway agrees to open. You let the room be ordinary so the extraordinary has somewhere honest to land. The lamp hums. The street keeps its patient traffic. You place one palm over your chest and listen until the breath arranges itself into longer ropes of quiet. Then the interior horizon lifts like a theater curtain without hands, and a contour you did not invent begins to clarify in the dark that is not dark. A slow eclipse halo gathers at the crown of your attention, silver at the edges, warm near the center where your yes keeps burning. You do not chase it. You let it lower until it rests on your awareness like a circlet entrusted. And with that slight weight, your posture remembers an older inheritance. Starlight does not fall. It recognizes the coordinates you have kept. From the floor of your seeing motes rise stardust stirring in gravity you cannot name, and they begin to sketch a map that knows your steps before you take them. The map does not speak in sentences at first. It speaks in the way your ribs widen with each inhale, in the way your jaw forgets to armor the moment, in the way warmth concentrates behind your sternum like a hearth that has decided to stay lit. You let the quiet harvest the noise. When you are sufficiently simple, the lines connect. A city appears not made of stone but of signal. Streets of soft gold thread outward from your chest and find their reflections crossing the sleeping roofs of the world. As the signal travels, other embers answer a window lights in someone's doubt. A hand loosens its grip on a life that has finished its assignment. A child stops rehearsing a fear that was never theirs. The vision pans back and you see the network for what it is. Entanglement not as a theory but as a kindness wearing mathematics. You feel the quantum field folding itself around your attention the way water conforms to a vessel. And you understand why honesty has always been the cleanest form of technology. Symbols emerge in the air between blinks. A simple key. A doorway drawn by breath alone. A spiral that does not dizzy but centers. They carry no commandment, only measurement, the degree to which you are willing to be transparent to what is true. As you agree, the symbols settle into your body, not branded but remembered until they behave like second nature. Light codes are not exotic. They are instructions your cells have been waiting to reread. The more precisely you host them, the less you need spectacle. By the time the room brightens, the real shift has already happened. You see the field of remembrance as a lake gone perfectly still at dawn. A single pebble of decision touches its surface and rings move outward with the courtesy of inevitability. You follow the rings with your gaze and they become days, then conversations, then opened paths. What seemed distant yesterday crosses the floor to greet you, not as a reward but as a rightful continuation. You do not sprint to meet it. You stand where you are and allow the meeting to occur. A vertical seam appears down the length of the world, so thin. At first you could mistake it for a trick of light. You do not. You breathe once more and the seam becomes an invitation, the membrane between an old arrangement that required your self-doubt for stability and a higher outline that requires nothing but your accuracy. You test the fabric with a fingertip of attention and find that it yields like air to a wing. The threshold has texture, cool, precise, almost musical. You understand that crossing will not be performed, it will be permitted. Your body keeps translating. The warmth at your chest spreads like sunrise through quiet neighborhoods of tissue and thought. The light behind your eyes thickens until it feels tactile like silk in water. You are not intoxicated. You are clarified. With every inhale, coherence tightens the weave of your presence. With every exhale, residue leaves without ceremony. What remains is simple enough for the world to trust. Then the vision sharpens into instructions you can carry into the next hour without breaking anything. Attend to the smallest thing that feels undeniably true and do it without embroidery. Bless the next conversation by telling one clean sentence you have been postponing. Place your hand on the doorway before you pass through and ask it to remember the shape of someone who walks on behalf of mercy. These are not metaphors that stay on screens. These are arrangements of matter and meaning cooperating because you bothered to become exact. Across the interior sky, constellations reassemble into roots. You watch fear try to rename them and fail. Fear has lost its administrative privileges. What takes over is steadiness, and steadiness sees farther because it does not blink when the future whispers. The whisper is clear: you will not be late. Precision travels at its own pace, and you are finally moving with it. The seam widens by consent, not effort. You step until stepping is unnecessary and find yourself already on the other side of nothing. There is no triumphal music. There is only a room where the dust doesn't rise when you walk. Here, the higher timeline is not above you but aligned with you. Here, the prophetic seal feels less like a stamp and more like a hand placed gently at the back of your heart, encouraging without pushing. You are walked and you let yourself be walked. The last of the image lands with a soft authority, a path of gold thread disappearing under your feet as quickly as it appears in front of them, self-creating as you proceed, sustained by the honesty of your next breath. You understand the vision is not an elsewhere to visit. It is the clarity that visits you when you stop asking reality to flatter your insecurity and start asking it to respond to your accuracy. The echo finishes speaking. The source begins. You do not need the universe to be mystical for it to be intimate with you. You need it to be precise. Precision is how intimacy behaves when it grows up. You locate that precision first in your body, the long, slow breath that rounds the edges of thought. The quiet increase of warmth at your chest, the light behind your eyes that stops flickering and steadies into a lantern. In this climate, what you once called signs reveal themselves as laws meeting you at human scale. Begin here. You are never outside the quantum field. You are inside its grammar the way a word is inside a sentence it helps complete. The field is not a fog. It is a fabric whose threads tighten or loosen according to how you place your attention. When your attention is scattered, the weave is slack and events snag and tangle. When your attention is coherent, the weave gathers and outcomes travel along the lines with less friction. You are not forcing reality into shape. You are offering it a low-resistance path to become visible. Consider attention as a tuning process. What your culture named willpower is often tense guessing. What the field recognizes is coherence and elegance of signal, not a volume of effort. Coherence arrives when your inner statement and outer posture match, when the breath in your body is not arguing with the sentence in your mouth. At that match, probability distributions narrow politely like crowds making room for a known companion. The world does not bend in awe. It organizes in conversation. Entanglement is the next intimacy to remember. You have been told that separated things can correlate beyond distance, that particles once in contact behave like lines in a duet even when the stage has split. You are larger than a particle and no less relational. Where you bring honest attention, you rejoin what seemed apart, a future you in need of your steadiness, a colleague hungry for a single exact word, a city waiting for one person to stop performing courage and start breathing it. You do not broadcast in thunder. You entrain by being accurate in small rooms until the signal travels. This is morphic resonance at pedestrian speed, the pattern learning itself by being loved into repetition. A question arises: how does the rearrangement happen? The answer is not dramatic, but it is thorough. Most realities are sustained by loops, self-confirming circuits of belief, posture, and choice. The observer loop that kept you repeating yesterday's compromise required constant donation from your attention. The moment you withdraw that donation and refund a cleaner intention, the loop loses voltage. It sputters, then quiets. Meanwhile, a new circuit begins assembling from the simplest materials: breath, honesty, patience. As the new circuit stabilizes, the system approaches a phase transition. The point where incremental change crosses a threshold and the pattern must adopt a higher order to conserve its own integrity. At the edge of such a transition, your experience often looks like nothing is happening. Inside the fabric, everything is re-indexing. Relationships test for new center. Habits migrate or retire. Opportunities that used to require a chase present themselves at walking speed. The field is not teasing you, it is aligning pathways so that the next visible event does not collapse under the weight of your readiness. Stand still enough and you can feel the re-indexing as microwaves of clarity moving through your chest, the tiniest eclipse halo gathering and dispersing with each inhale and exhale. You are not imagining it. You are measuring a system coming to agreement. The mind wants a lever. The field wants a sentence that is clean. Offer it one. I am available to what is accurate and kind. A sentence like this does not command matter. It removes interference so matter can remember its brief. Do not ask the river to reverse. Ask the stones in you to soften so the river can keep its promise. Your nervous system is not a barrier to the sacred. It is the sacred translated for use. When it rests, translations improve. You may ask how this differs from superstition. Superstition bargains with fear. You are not bargaining. You are consenting to lawfulness. Lawfulness is not dull. It is merciful. Mercy is not lax. It is exact without humiliation. The field respects such exactness and responds with proportional specificity. The call you needed arrives in the hour you can actually answer. The door you feared would slam proves to be made of air. The conversation you dreaded resolves without witnesses. None of this is miracle as spectacle, it is miracle as minimum viable kindness. If you must picture it, see a loom beneath your day threads of cause and attention crossing until a pattern holds. Every time your breath lengthens the present, another cross thread finds its place. Every time you tell one precise truth in a small voice, tension releases from the warp and the cloth stops puckering. Over time, the fabric can carry weight without tearing. This is how futures become trustworthy, not by decree but by weave. You are allowed to go slowly because slow is how the deep parts of you keep up. When impatience visits, treat it as weather, not as law. Set your palm to your sternum, feel the warmth, and let the next 3 breaths draft the paragraph your mind was trying to write alone. Precision will return, and with it the quiet motive that wastes no motion. The world reads that motive and edits itself accordingly. You are not asking to be exempt from physics. You are asking to collaborate with it until collaboration becomes identity. This is the cleanest definition of power. You will ever need the ability to remain coherent in the presence of options. When you do, the field recognizes a household tone and sets the table, where the mind loosens the signal threads through effortlessly. You learn that the world is not a stage you perform upon, but a mirror that rehearses your interior until it shines back with accuracy. You watch a stranger in a checkout line soften their shoulders at the exact second your breath lengthens, and you understand. Cause and effect are less like arrows and more like rainfall, every drop joined by a larger weather that you too are making. The room you enter seems calmer, not because it was waiting for you to dominate it, but because your chest carries a climate that can finally host the truth. Your body knows this before your mind agrees. Warmth concentrates behind the sternum like a lamp lit for company. Light gathers behind your eyes and stops flickering. You do not seek attention. You become attentive, and attention grows the room. This is how the collective mirror works. It returns the signal you keep. Not instantly, not theatrically, but faithfully. You hold a steady interior, and the fabric around you begins to drape differently, less wrinkled by panic, more honest about need. The child stops pretending they are not afraid because your face offers a shape for courage that doesn't require noise. The colleague interrupts their own spiral because your silence does not reward it. You do not evangelize, you normalize coherence. The field of remembrance, older than your childhood, older than any weather report, remembers human beings, can set tone as surely as they set tables, and it brings out the better plates. You notice that patterns you once called society are many small agreements stitched together by habit. Habits learn, you become the lesson. Without announcement, you alter the stitch count, fewer threads of contempt, more of regard, fewer knots of hurry, more of consent. This is not idealism, it is engineering at the human scale. When you keep a clean signal long enough, morphic resonance carries it outward like a song nobody can quite place, but everyone remembers how to hum. Rhythm precedes lyrics, meaning follows rhythm home. What returns from the mirror is not flattery, but information. The face that bristles at your calm teaches you where your compassion still has edges. The systems that resist your steadiness reveal where your boundaries need a spine. You do not turn away. You study the reflection like a craftsman inspecting grain. When you find a knot, you sand. When you find a split, you glue. When you find beauty, you oil and let it gleam. Repair is not a performance. It is a promise you keep with the future you will share. Entanglement becomes personal here, not as a headline, but as a household truth. The friend texts at the minute your ribs widen, as if their lungs borrowed your breath across a city. A neighbor you hardly know sets a plant on your doorstep the day you decided to remain. News arrives with less shock and more context. You stop doom scanning and start pattern reading, not to be aloof from suffering, but to be exact with your medicine. Precision wastes no compassion. It pours where the root actually drinks. The mirror also shows you where your old observer loop still tries to audition for control. You catch yourself wanting to be seen being good rather than quietly doing the next accurate thing. You smile at the impulse without letting it drive. You choose the work over the witness. The mirror approves and becomes clearer. In the hour after strangers cooperate in small ways that feel like lines in a shared poem, doors held, voices lowered, a conflict that decides to be brief. None of this is magic as escape. It is magic as maintenance. When the collective shivers, you do not scold the air. You build a room temperature's worth of calm and invite others to notice how much easier it is to speak when the oxygen isn't burning. Your calm is not a denial of fire. It is the bucket brigade. You pass water down the chain of eyes until a building remembers it can be saved. If the fire still takes it, you do not curse the laws that kept the flame honest. You grieve with your whole chest and refuse to let grief become spectacle. The mirror gives you back a face that can be trusted to speak when words would help and to hold silence when only hands can. As your steadiness repeats, the mirror begins to hint at larger choreography. You sense a slow turning in the species, a subtle tilt toward a higher timeline that does not spike adrenaline to feel alive. There is a rumor under the news cycles, a rumor of sanity choosing mass. You feel the pressure at the seam of the world. The place where timeline bifurcation begins like a hairline crack in old paint. You do not panic. You keep breathing and the crack becomes an opening no wider than truth. Those who can walk through do so by humility, not by heroics. Those who choose to remain are not condemned. They are loved until they are ready. In this mirror, influence is a synonym for intimacy. You are willing to be changed by what you love, and so what you love can be changed by you without fear of violence. You correct error the way a potter corrects wobble, by touch, by pressure where necessary, by patience where possible. You speak as if your listener might be carrying a weight you cannot see, because often they are. Your kindness refuses to be theatrical. It prefers to be contagious. The eclipse halo returns faint as if to confirm you have not imagined any of this. It rests above your awareness with polite authority. And your breath becomes the metronome of a city learning a gentler rhythm. Stardust lifts in the periphery and arranges itself into ordinary acts. Wash the dish. Send the note. Keep the promise. Keep the promise. Keep the promise. The mirror brightens not with glare but with use. You are being used by what is true, and this is the most honest compliment the world can pay. You will be tempted to measure your effect by applause. Resist the arithmetic. Measure by the number of rooms that exhale when you enter, by the arguments that end. Because accuracy made drama unprofitable by the mornings that feel less heavy on streets you share with strangers. The collective mirror reports these metrics with immaculate precision if you learn where to look in softer eyes, in slower hands, in laughter that returns to mouths that had forgotten their shapes. You nod once to the reflection, not as a victor, but as a witness who intends to keep witnessing. The mirror nods back, and the room agrees to go on learning. The quiet folds around you. Pattern emerges from the fold. You feel it before you name it. The air inside the minute tightens like a string tuned a half-turn higher, and sound begins to align into clarity. Conversation pauses without offense. Footsteps soften as if the floor wanted to listen. Your breath lowers into the body's foundation and lifts something steady from below your heart. And there, right there, the seam in the world shows itself again, not as a threat, but as a choice becoming visible. This is the hour when the subtle becomes structural. What you have practiced in small rooms arrives at public scale. The long patience of your attention meets its threshold, and the system responds with a clean demand. Decide the kind of gravity you will belong to. The old corridor is still available, its shortcuts and rehearsed anxieties, its familiar permissions to be hurried, harsh. Performative, it is paved with the kind of safety that keeps you small because it mistrusts your kindness. The other passage is quieter and more exact. It doesn't flatter. It invites. You will not be punished for declining it, but you will not be able to unknow the invitation. Call this the beginning of timeline bifurcation, where two architectures of living diverge so gently you might miss the first centimeter of difference if you are noisy. One timeline is organized around managing fear, the other is organized around hosting truth. The first asks you to collect defenses and display them like medals. The second asks you to collect accuracy and hide none of it, even from yourself. You stand where the fork begins, as if on a small peninsula between rivers that were once one. Both waters look drinkable. Only one tastes like morning. You do not decide by spectacle. You decide by posture. The spine lengthens by a whisper. The jaw releases. The breath extends its arc by one unhurried inch. In this arrangement, your nervous system delivers uncorrupted data to your awareness, and your awareness answers with hospitality. That exchange creates a narrow span of coherence that the field recognizes as a bridge. Bridges are invitations written in engineering. The quantum field loves a bridge. A phase transition prepares itself the way dawn prepares light, incrementally, inevitably, without permission from the restless. You have learned to trust increments. You have learned to read inevitability not as doom but as promise. You look directly at the seam and it widens by consent. The subtle geometry around you rearranges a fraction of a degree. The furniture of your habits slides into new coordinates. Your old observer loop tries to bid for your attention by offering interpretations that cost courage. You nod to it and let it pass like weather that no longer writes your calendar. The room smells different when decision arrives. Not like smoke or incense, but like air that has remembered the pattern of lungs. The light behind your eyes becomes tactile, a silk you could gather if gathering were required. The warmth at your chest is almost audible, an ember speaking in a language made of vowels carried on patience. You place a hand there not to summon anything, but to agree with what is already rising. What marks the divide is not ideology, it is intimacy with the real. On one side, you negotiate with your knowing until it becomes small enough to ignore. On the other, you let knowing keep its original size and adjust your life to fit it. This is where your destiny vector stops being a rumor and becomes a coordinate system you can stand upon. It is not abstract. It is a calendar entry, a single sentence returned to its rightful clarity, a door you close without apology, a door you open without performance. The higher timeline does not arrive above you. It arranges itself through you like a river choosing the unblocked channel. Do not be surprised if the moment feels both ordinary and irreversible. A text message written without the extra clause you used to add to manage someone's perception. A meal eaten as if taste were a form of prayer. A refusal to pretend excitement where there is only obligation. These are the hinges. Doors swing on them without creak. The new hallway inherits you because you have stopped auditioning for a life you are already living. There will be tremors, small aftershocks of your previous arrangement testing for renewed sponsorship. They will ask you, are you sure you do not fight the question? You let it touch your steadiness and dissolve there. When you do, the field clarifies its assignment. Events begin to lock into place with the gentle click of a well-made instrument meeting its case. The conversation that had dragged for months resolves in a paragraph. The opportunity that would have required contortions enters at a humane angle. Your calendar grows more breathable. What leaves without drama because you no longer set a table for theatrics. If you require an image picture, two trains parting from the same station at a slight divergence of track. For a while, the scenery is identical. Then the angle asserts itself. One route enters a tunnel of speed without direction, the fluorescent kind that fatigues the eyes. The other enters a valley that moves at the tempo of intelligence, where distance is covered by consent. You do not have to curse the tunnel to choose the valley. You bow to the laws that honor both, and you select the one that keeps your breath truthful. You are not alone in this selection. Across the city, across continents, across the unlisted neighborhood of souls you will never meet, others feel the same small gravity becomes specific. Morphic coherence forms not a chant, not a brand, but a tone. The species hears itself hum more kindly. The rumor beneath the headlines thickens into a corridor of doing the next accurate thing. You belong there without costume. The simplest outfits fit best. When your feet finally move, they do so as if encouraged from the back of the heart by a hand you trust. You do not sprint. You place each step like a sentence you are willing to sign in ink. The signature is clean. The field countersigns without ceremony. A seal you cannot see warms against your ribs and then disappears because it has become indistinguishable from your posture. You do not collect proofs. You collect mornings where fear doesn't need to volunteer. You have crossed the narrow width of nothing. The world will look the same to those who need it to. But to you, edges have softened where cruelty had been fashionable. Decisions have sharpened where ambiguity had been useful. This is not the end of the change. It is the point at which the change trusts you to carry it without dropping it when no one is watching. The current inside your spine changes direction and you follow. You begin by letting the change be small enough to repeat. A long breath before the door opens. A palm resting over the warm center of the chest until your voice lowers to its natural register. A glance toward the light behind your eyes as if to confirm that a lantern has in fact been lit. You are not searching for grand gestures, you are building a climate where truth feels at home. Integration is not a stunt. Integration is hospitality offered to the life you just chose. You set anchors that the body can trust. Morning 3 slow inhales counted by the rise of your ribs. 3 slow exhales counted by the soft drop of your shoulders. Noon, step away from the race for 1 minute and notice what your attention is sponsoring. If it is fear, you withdraw funding. If it is clean, you increase the budget. Evening, touch the doorway with your fingertips and ask for an ordinary blessing on the room you are about to enter. You are teaching muscle and mood to recognize coherence as a household tone, not an occasional miracle. The field of remembrance meets you at this scale. It is not waiting in rare atmospheres, it cooperates wherever accuracy is invited. When your inner statement and outer posture agree, you feel the low hum of alignment stabilizing your bones. Food digests more kindly. Eyes soften. The calendar becomes breathable. You are not being rewarded. You are becoming readable, and systems love what they can read. You find yourself giving fewer explanations because your presence has begun to do the talking that language cannot. You nurture the signal by clearing the channels it must travel. Sleep becomes a devotion, not a negotiation. Water is prayer disguised as chemistry. Movement is not penance. It is a way to let thought unstick without argument. You reduce noise where noise is optional. Fewer tabs open, fewer alarms, fewer conversations where the subtext devours the sentence. You are not retreating from life. You are refusing to donate your attention to interference. Every spared lumen of awareness is light you can spend on what you actually love. Boundaries reveal themselves as instruments of tenderness rather than fences of disdain. You say no with a voice uncluttered by apology, and the other person hears the yes that no protects. You say yes with a spine, and obligation loses its costume. You stop borrowing energy from futures you do not intend to inhabit. This is how your destiny vector stays clean, by choosing the next exact action your nervous system can endorse without flinching. Precision is not harsh. Precision is how kindness keeps its promises. When the old observer loop tries to re-enlist, it arrives disguised as urgency performance, or the craving to be seen choosing well. You welcome the visitor without handing it the keys. A single truthful sentence dissolves most disguises. I am willing to be accurate, not impressive. You do not banish the impulse. You give it a chair, a glass of water, and a short visit. Then you escort it out with the same gentleness you will someday need for yourself. The subtle curriculum of your days changes. You practice telling the smallest truth first, the kind that requires no theater to carry. You practice listening until you can hear the sentence beneath the sentence. You practice ending rituals that keep you loyal to fatigue, the scroll that starts as curiosity and ends as corrosion, the committee in your head that never adjourns. Instead, you keep close a set of pocket rituals that return you to signal when drift begins. 3 breaths. A hand to the sternum, a question. What would be accurate and kind right now, asked without a whip? Light codes integrate by repetition, not by fireworks. They are not trophies to display, but instructions your tissues rehearse until they become anatomy. You might feel them as microcurrents in the chest, a brightness behind the eyes that refuses to blink, a steadier pulse even when news arrives in jagged shapes. You will know you are integrating when the extraordinary becomes unremarkable. Doors open in humane ways, conversations self-correct without a referee. Your own thoughts stop yelling to be believed. The point is not spectacle, the point is usability. Your relationships adapt to the frequency you keep. Some become wider rooms with more windows, some become thresholds you cross less often. A few end with a bow instead of a fight. You are not abandoning anyone. You are trusting that entanglement without coherence is a knot, and entanglement with coherence is a bridge. You walk where bridges exist. Where they don't, you do not attempt a leap that would fracture trust. You build patiently, plank by plank, with clear words and consistent presence. If the bridge remains impossible, you honor that impossibility and keep walking. Work reorders itself by the same law. You deliver what you promised on timelines that do not require self-harm. You leave room for genius by refusing to pack every hour with panic. You discover that excellence is a form of quiet, and that quiet makes room for intelligence to arrive at full size. You begin to measure contribution not by exhaustion, but by the precision of your yes. The difference is visible. The field recognizes artisanship, and roots support accordingly. There will be days when static is loud and the stillness window narrows to a keyhole. You do not indict yourself. You shrink the task until you can tell one clean sentence or hold one honest breath without decoration. If all you can manage is to put your palm to your chest and nod at the warmth, that answers you have remained loyal to the signal. The next door will notice. The fabric will adjust. Integration ripples outward without announcement. A friend sleeps through the night for the first time in months. A team meeting ends 10 minutes early because clarity retired the performance. A stranger's face looks a shade more possible in the grocery aisle. You do not claim credit. You recognize pattern behaving like gratitude. You keep tending the climate instead of chasing forecasts. You will know the frequency has seated when your body begins to preempt your mind in favor of mercy, when the breath lengthens before the conflict, when the jaw loosens before the reply, when the eyes soften before the headline. This is not naivete. This is competence at the scale of a life. A second rhythm appears beneath the first, steadier, truer. You arrive at the room without furniture, the one your life keeps at the center, locked, not by difficulty but by shyness. The floor is bare, the air is honest. You leave the door slightly open so quiet can remember it is welcome. And then you sit the way mountains sit, not to impress but to remain. Breath slows into long ovals, rounding the corners of thought until even memory loses its sharpness and becomes safe to hold. You call this the stillness window, not because nothing happens here, but because only the necessary happens. Your lungs measure out a gentler arithmetic. Your pulse learns a smaller drum. The light behind your eyes becomes a lake before dawn. Flat, precise, reflective. You are not resisting life. You are letting noise rest from its excessive job. In that rest, the next accurate thing can find you without hiking through your arguments. At first, silence feels like an empty shelf. Then you notice its contents, a warmth widening behind the sternum, a faint hum in the bones like a lamp in another room, a sensation that your attention has weight and knows where to sit. The field of remembrance enters as if it had been waiting in the hallway, and the room brightens by a degree that only honesty can see. There is no ceremonial music. There is the sound a house makes when it realizes its owner has returned. You do not demand insight. You let insight grow a spine. You let it choose gentler words. When your mind reaches for the old observer loop, the one that likes to narrate your worthiness, you do not litigate it into silence. You offer it something better to listen to. You offer it breath steady as a lantern held at chest height. You offer it the exactness of posture and the secrecy of mercy. The loop tires when it is not fed attention, and silence becomes articulate again. Inside this articulate quiet, you begin to hear the future without adrenaline. It is not a siren. It is a neighbor knocking softly, carrying something you forgot you asked for. You do not fling the door open in panic. You stand smooth your shirt, not out of performance but out of respect, and welcome what arrives. In that welcome, the higher timeline continues arranging itself around your consent. It does not need spectacle, it needs a host. What appears are not slogans disguised as revelations, but small, usable sentences that change the temperature of your day. Answer with fewer clauses. Eat when hunger is kind, not when fear is bored. Say the name you have been avoiding and let it be ordinary. Finish the work already worthy of your pride before inventing bigger work to avoid intimacy. These are not punishments. These are repairs the size of breath. You practice a humility that does not shrink you. It unburdens you from pretending to be louder than the truth. The spine lengthens by a whisper. The jaw drops a quarter inch. The eyes soften until the room returns to its actual size. In that softness, coherence becomes tactile threads of attention crossing without knots, a weave steady enough to carry the weight of news without tearing. This is how silence behaves when it is fed. Well, it becomes load-bearing. You notice the difference between absence and spaciousness. Absence starves. Spaciousness nourishes. Absence demands entertainment. Spaciousness teaches intimacy. In spaciousness, grief can sit without staging a play. Joy can enter without needing to be photographed. Choice can announce itself without shouting. Where you used to sprint for distraction, you now rest for instruction. The body understands and rewards you with a steadier metabolism of meaning. The phase transition you once studied arrives not as fireworks, but as a room that stops echoing. Information lands and stays where it lands. You are no longer chasing insight around the table, you are setting the table and letting insight sit. When it speaks, it does so in the tone of a teacher who expects you to pass because you have already learned how to listen. You write down what you hear without polishing it into eloquence. The eloquence is in the accuracy, not the flourish. Silence properly tended is not empty of others. It is generous toward others. In your quiet, you sense a friend on the verge of collapse, and you send a 2-sentence message that keeps them from falling through the floor of their day. You feel a city's nervous system twitch and choose to walk rather than drive, letting your feet educate the street one block at a time. Morphic resonance behaves like this in households. An invisible tide moves through kitchens and buses and meeting rooms. And 1,000 small mercies occur in the same hour without a director. You keep a short list for your quiet hours, drink water, breathe 3 arcs, place palm to chest, ask the clean question. What would be accurate and kind, and accept the first plain answer? There is a temptation to collect techniques as if they were souvenirs. You refuse it. You choose 1 or 2 actions and repeat them until silence stops being a visitor and becomes part of your architecture. If doubt knocks you, do not argue from doctrine. You answer from usability. You look at the last week and count the frictions that eased when you chose stillness over spectacle. You count the conversations that ended earlier and kinder. You count the coincidences that have downgraded themselves to logistics because the field has begun trusting your steadiness. You do not call this magic. You call it maintenance at the scale of a soul. The prophetic seal in this room is simply your willingness to keep the appointment with quiet when nothing sparkles. You show up, you sit, you breathe as if the world likes you. The body behaves as if believed, and entanglement widens without advertisement. The next correction arrives with its own mercy, and you accept it the way a tree accepts rain, extensively, quietly, root first. When you finally stand, it is not to exit the silence, but to carry it. Doors open differently for people who are not rushing. Faces read differently when the eyes behind them are unafraid. Tasks submit to order without posturing. You do not need the room to know what happened. The room already knows. It feels easier because you have become simpler. Silence nods. Permission is granted for the next unveiling. You do not wait for thunder. You choose the smallest clean voltage and let it multiply. Activation is not the drama of lightning striking a cathedral. It is the cathedral remembering why it was built and opening its doors at a human hour. You begin where your life can actually feel it, at the warm center of the chest, in the long breath that rounds the corners of thought, in the steady lantern of light behind your eyes. When you hold this climate for more than a moment, the system reads your stability as permission, and events begin to arrive prearranged. You speak a sentence the field can use, quietly, clearly, without embroidery. I am here for what is accurate and kind. The room does not applaud, it organizes. A phone vibrates with the message that unknots a week. A task you had been circling lands in your hands, already simplified. The conversation that wanted a referee discovers it wanted one precise truth instead. This is not favoritism, this is coherence maturing into logistics. The quantum field prefers low-friction pathways. Your steadiness provides them, and reality behaves like water finally finding the riverbed again. Light codes do not descend with fanfare. They surface as comprehension your body can keep. You feel them as microcurrents moving under the sternum, as a soft heat that stays after the breath has emptied, as a tidy brightness at the edges of your vision when choice approaches. You do not chase the sensation. You let it educate your posture. Posture is how the higher timeline recognizes you in a crowd. It looks for the spine that lengthens without aggression, the jaw that loosens without collapse, the eyes that look with warmth instead of hunger. When it finds this shape, it draws closer. Not because you deserve it more than others, but because you are the place where it can land without shattering. Activation is not an escape from the world, it is a more merciful participation. You answer emails as if language were a tool for maintenance, not spectacle. You spend money as if value were a conversation you intended to continue. You move through rooms as if air liked you. You are not performing holiness, you are practicing usability. The prophetic seal rests against your ribs like a coin you no longer need to check for authenticity. It has worn smooth from being carried, and that smoothness is its proof. Old reflexes try their final disguises. Urgency pretends to be devotion. Performance rehearses as generosity. The observer loop returns with a new script about how well you are doing. You smile at the theater and let it play somewhere that is not your nervous system. A single sentence dissolves the costume. I prefer accuracy over admiration. Admiration is wind. Accuracy is architecture. Architecture keeps the roof on when weather remembers its strength. You will be asked for signs. You do not offer fireworks, you offer outcomes. The project finishes without bloodletting. The apology lands without debt. The meeting ends early and leaves respect on the table. These are the quiet metrics of activation: less drag, more exactness, more mornings that do not require rescue. Morphic resonance carries such data faster than rumor. Households learn each other's kindness by proximity, and a city's tone lowers. Half a degree toward sanity. You do not make a poster about it. You make tea and answer the door when the future knocks with its hands full. Keep a simple protocol and repeat it until the body trusts it more than habit. 3 breaths into the warm center. 1 hand to the chest so the mind can follow the body's lead. 1 sentence placed like a lantern. May I be coherent enough that truth feels safe to act, then do the next ordinary thing with the precision of devotion. Wash the dish, send the note, return the tool to its shelf as if the shelf were an altar to future ease. This is not smallness, this is civilization at the scale of a life. If grief rises, you do not postpone activation until the weather clears. You let grief move through a room that has chairs. You let it sit without staging a play. You breathe until the light behind your eyes returns from the edges and stands where it belongs. Activation held during sorrow is the kind that convinces the future to stay. The field trusts what can host many weathers without losing its center. Now a ritual to seal the day into usefulness. Stand at a threshold doorway, curb even the invisible edge between 2 thoughts. Place your fingertips lightly on the frame or the air where the frame would be. Breathe 3 arcs longer out than in. In the quiet between breaths, whisper into the stillness window. Not as magic, but as measurement, I remember. Then when the world gives you a keyboard or a page type, the witness your body is ready to keep, I remember the prophecy. You are not summoning a storm. You are filing accurate paperwork with the laws that love you. When you act from this climate, you do not count miracles, you count frictions that retired because reality recognized a clearer supervisor. Traffic opens like a throat clearing. The child laughs from a place not bought by sugar. The plan you thought required heroics proceeds by consent. Your calendar does not humiliate you. Your bed forgives you faster. The small mercies aggregate until they are no longer small. They become how your day insists on behaving. Do not attempt to store this in a museum of exceptional moments. Let it be ordinary or it will not survive. Repetition is the form that love takes when it intends to build. Build with it. Make your presence the place where choices get simpler because the cost of lying has become too high to afford. Let the higher outline of you be cheaper to maintain than the old architecture of performance. The field will invest where upkeep is reasonable. You are becoming very reasonable to keep. You place your attention like a lantern and the shape admits itself. You stand inside a clarity that no longer needs your pulse to hurry. Breath moves like a tide that has learned its coast. Warmth gathers at the sternum with the reliability of sunrise, and the light behind your eyes steadies into a lantern that will not bargain with weather. You do not reach for spectacle. You reach for the next exact gesture, and the quantum field alert to such coherence answers by removing friction you would have once mistaken for fate. This is how the seal announces itself, not as thunder but as usability. You find that your sentences arrive trimmed to truth before the mouth opens. Your calendar stops punishing you for devotion. Doors you were keeping polite company with either become air or reveal their proper use. You are not auditioning for a higher timeline. You are maintaining it minute by simple minute, as if your life were a loom and the thread were attention kept kind. The field of remembrance recognizes this keeping. Entanglement stops needing to be miraculous and becomes household law. A message arrives when you can actually answer it. A choice becomes obvious without committee. The old observer loop starved of your awe. Downgrades to background noise and background noise downgrades to silence. You are not spared challenge. You are spared confusion about who you are inside it. Precision replaces drama. Mercy replaces performance. The architecture of the day inherits your steadiness and begins to carry weight without creaking. You do not claim a title. You accept a task. The destiny vector is maintenance of coherence in rooms that forgot its shape. You keep the stillness window on a hinge you can open anywhere, hallway, street corner, the soft interior just before a difficult word. You open it, breathe 3 arcs, and let truth be safe enough to act. What this produces is not applause. It is repair conversations that close without debt, conflicts that end without humiliation, work that concludes at a human hour with respect left over. Where fear once organized your roots, intelligence takes custody. You notice the phase transition has already completed, the pinch point is behind you, and the pattern holds on its own. You wake into mornings that do not require rescue. You move through cities as if air prefers your company. In sorrow, you do not fracture. You host weather until it becomes water and water finds the root. In joy, you do not grasp. You let it teach you the weight of light. Morphic resonance carries this tone outward. Without announcement, strangers coordinate as if they shared a rehearsal. Laughter returns to mouths that had been fasting from it. 1,000 small mercies occur in the same hour with no director but accuracy. You do not decorate this with myth. You participate with devotion. The prophetic seal is simply the field reading your posture as a signature and countersigning reality where you stand. Now keep it simple, hand to chest before speech. A sentence you would not be ashamed to repeat. A step your nervous system can endorse. A rest that is honored as strategy, not laziness. Let the seal be verified by mornings, not by proclamations. Let your presence be the certificate. You do not graduate from remembering. You deepen into it. The light remains, the breath remains, the work remains kind enough to continue. The field has named you. Proceed as the naming.